Hello, thanks for joining me. This is Story Time with Uncle Sid. Okay, so I get the Story Time with Uncle Sid theme from my great-grandfather. Now, my great-grandfather was born in 1874. Nope, 1878. And he lived until 1976. So he's 98 years old when he passed away. And I had the privilege of knowing him when I was a very little boy. And it was magnificent to me that my grandfather at the time I thought was very old, but here I was talking to his dad, who was ancient. He was so old, I bet he sat behind Moses in the 3rd grade. This guy was delightful. His name was Will. We called him Granddad Great. And he used to sit in this old rocking chair and smoke a pipe, and he'd sit there and tell stories. And I'd sit on the floor and listen to him just tell these magnificent stories. He had a thick German accent, and he had, his ears were big and long, and he looked like just this most amazing character-filled bag of wrinkles, for lack of a better term. But I was delighted by his stories. Now, I didn't know at the time that he had been a prominent businessman in the cattle industry, cattle and ranching, but he would tell stories that were way back stories for even him. He would tell stories about when his oldest son, my grandfather, was a little boy, and how they used to go to the next town or to town to get provisions. And I guess they would get flour and water and sugar, flour and salt and sugar, things. I mean, we're talking, this is probably 1910, 1915 at the latest. And his son, my grandfather, was 7, 8, maybe 9 years old. And they would hitch up a buckboard wagon with 2 horses, and they would set off to go to the next town. And oftentimes they would do this in the winter. And this is one of the stories he told me. He told me how, he said, your grandfather, Charlie, was a little boy, and he was always cold. It'd be in the winter time. And we'd hook up the wagon, he said, but his mama would take time to take a big stone and put it in the wood-burning stove overnight and heat it. So it would cook this rock, and then the morning before they would leave, after a good breakfast, would wrap the stone up in blankets, and set it in the floorboard of the buckboard. And then little Charlie would put his feet on it and then wrap up in blankets, and then they go right into town. And the trip into town would take 1 to 2 days to get there. And they'd buy all the goods, the provisions they needed, load them up, spend the night, and then the next morning they'd head back. And I was fascinated, because this was in the era of like Smokey and the Bandit, and high-powered muscle cars, Trans Ams and stuff. And I just had such a hard time imagining taking, a trip that would normally take an hour, taking a day or 2 days, and go by horse and buggy. Fascinating, okay? But here's the cool thing. I learned so much listening to the stories that my great-grandfather told. And I learned about his character. I learned about history. I learned about family history. And I learned about the amount of effort and time and work that it took 100 years ago, literally, to get the simplest of tasks done. Today, you and I hop in a car or pickup, drive over to Costco, load up on a bunch of stuff that we probably don't even need that bad. We get a case of it because it's Costco, and then we drive home, and it takes 2 hours, and it's no big deal. It's just expensive. But in the old days, they had to plan ahead. They had to plan ahead for weeks. Go load up enough stuff that was going to last them for months, because you couldn't just hop in a car and run to town and back. Fascinating, right? All right, that's all for now. That's Story Time with Uncle Sid. I just want you to know where the stories come from. And what I see is the value of learning from other people's history and learning from other people's stories. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon. Bye.